right, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the October meeting of the Board of Directors for the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. Thank you for joining us at our early start time. I see, appreciate it. May I have a roll call, please?
Director Hoffman.
Here.
Director Adams.
Here.
Director Edwards.
Here.
Director Evans.
Here.
Director Riley.
Here.
Director Potter.
Here.
And Director Byrne is absent this evening.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to inform everyone that tonight's meeting will not be web streamed or broadcast live due to some technical difficulties at AMP, but the rebroadcast will happen. Next. Would you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Thank you. So are there any additions or corrections to the agenda? I do have one.
Oh.
I would like to continue the item 13, consider approval of amendment to agreement for employment of general manager to our November meeting.
Do you want a motion to that effect then, for the record?
If there are any other changes, then we could approve them as one, or do you want to do it?
Oh, no.
Well, if there are no other changes, then yes, please.
Okay, I'd like to move continuation of the item.
Second.
All right, we have a motion, Director Potter, a second from Director Riley. Any discussion? Oh, then all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. That item will be continued to November. And I would like to open up oral communications now. Anyone wishing to address the board on any matter not on the agenda this evening?
Dan Turner, Monterey. I think it was at last month's meeting that a fella from Marriott wondered what sweetheart deal I was referring to. He said that his hotel was paying 3 times as much money for only half the amount of water compared with 10 years ago. Well, without the sweetheart deal, where Cal-Am eliminated tiered rates for businesses and replaced them in 2013 with one low rate, somewhere, I think, in the lower end of the residential Tier 2 rates, his hotel would probably be paying 4, 5, or 6 times more than they did 10 years ago. To me, that's a real deal, and a sweet one. You know, just about the entire business community has displayed a selfish, craven venality in its support of Cal-Am as a result of that sweetheart deal. Cal-Am's strategy of dividing the community against itself, the business owners against the rest of us who just work for a living, is diabolically clever. But remember, diabolical still means morally and ethically bankrupt. This animosity between residents and businesses will continue forever until you guys get rid of Cal-Am and establish a public water system. Incidentally, I tried to calculate how much the savings would be for a hotel under the new commercial rate, as opposed to under the old tiered system, but the statistics for the business tiered rates have disappeared down the memory hole. I tried to find them here at the Water Management District with the help of one of the very knowledgeable employees, but no luck. We couldn't find a trace of them. Couldn't find them at the PUC either. And for some reason, Cal-Am won't return my calls about it. I was hoping I'd hear a Cal-Am person say, "We'll get those numbers right over to you, Dan," but I guess not. Since I have a few seconds left, let me say that this is the last time that you'll be seeing me in a Hawaiian shirt until about next May.
Thank you, Mr. Turner. Anyone else wishing to address the board? Okay.
Good evening. Some of what I'm about to read on my letter that I sent to the California Coastal Commission, you've heard
Tom,
before.
would you do us a favor and state your name, even though we know who you are?
Tom Raleigh. Usually I'm here to address you as the spokesperson for the Monterey Peninsula taxpayers.
And turn the mic back on, Tom.
Turned it off, okay. So anyway, usually I'm here for MPTA, but tonight I'm here with some, pardon? Go Niners. For some personal comments, I submitted to the California Coastal Commission as a realtor with experience in commercial real estate. Not recently, and I'll explain. I said, Dear California Coastal Commissioners and staff, overview. Often overlooked is the vital role of small businesses in the total economy of all the communities of the Monterey Peninsula. Comments. Small business opportunities, both new and expansion of existing small businesses, are being strangled by lack of adequate water allocation availability in the 6 cities and Monterey County unincorporated area here on the Monterey Peninsula, and you know the 6 cities. And jobs are absolutely essential to balancing any new housing which has been mandated by the state of California and is quotas established by AMBAG, our regional metro planning area. It is the classic challenge that this community and all the land use jurisdictions face of maintaining a healthy jobs housing balance. And I might add, recently, City of Monterey blew it as far as I was concerned and converted commercial zoning into housing. I mean, this is going in the wrong direction as far as jobs housing balance. Without the new water from the proposed desal plant as the top producer for the 3-part Monterey Peninsula Water Supply Project, the economy of the Monterey Peninsula will continue to be crippled. No doubt about it. My recommendation, please approve the Coastal Development Plan for the proposed Cal-Am Water desal slant wells intake system and overrule the negative decision by the City of Marina Planning Commission. My comments are based on my personal experience as a licensed real estate agent working during the 1990s and early 2000s to assist small businesses, prospective small business owners, and commercial property owners here on the Monterey Peninsula. And unfortunately, the lack of, quote, new, unquote, water allocations forced me to stop working in this aspect of commercial real estate. We need the water. And all the other proposals in the phase 2 aren't going to do it. So sincerely, thank you. And I just wanted, you've heard me tell part of this story, but this is more a complete story I wanted you to hear. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Rowley.
Michael Baer. I want to express my thanks to the board. What a difference a year makes. A year ago it was October and we hadn't had an election yet. A lot of things have changed. I want to give special thanks to Dave Stolt and to Chair Evans for the water budget report that went out a few weeks ago, to the Coastal Commission staff and to the community. And I understand that Director Evans directed Mr. Stolt to do that, so thank you both for that. I think that was important information for this important decision. Today I was at the Colton Hall this morning, and it was in honor of an endorsement of 28 elected officials who have submitted a letter to the Coastal Commission urging them to deny the coastal permit for the desal plant. Now, I haven't read the letter, and I don't know who all the 28 people are. But since you are electeds, I encourage you to read the letter if you haven't, and to consider signing it. I also finally want to give a special thanks to Chair Evans again, who soon will be referred to as Director Evans again. I'm not sure where I'll be on the 3rd Monday of November or December, but I do know where I'll be on November 12th. The Embassy Suites. See you all there. I got to go to Marina now.
Thank you, Mr. Baer. Anyone else wishing to address the board? All right, then I will close oral communications and move on to the consent calendars. Any other directors wishing to pull any item for discussion? Any member of the public wishing to pull any item for discussion? Yes.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware that the reason there's 3 treasurers' reports, for those of you who don't go to our AdCom meetings, is as we close out the year with our auditors in town, we can't close everything out in June and produce July and August. So normally you'd see them the month after it would be closed out.
Move approval of the
Thank you.
consent calendar.
Second?
Thank you. We have a motion to approve from Director Potter and a second from Director Adams. Any discussion? Well then, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to General Manager's report.
Yes, this is a report on compliance by the company with the State Water Resources Control Board order and the Seaside Basin decision through the end of the water year, so it's a little more meaningful that way. There's just a couple things to highlight. The first is traditionally we go to the bottom right-hand corner, and you can see that the actual target was 9832, and the actual was 9435, a difference of almost 400 acre-feet below target. It's a very good sign, and we were in compliance with both the CDO and the adjudication. This table looks quite a bit similar to last month's table, just underscores that Table 13 water rights outperformed, which is what you would expect in a rainy winter. And ASR recovery is a little under what we expected, which means we're carrying over ASR water into the new water year. And then looking at production from all sources for customer service, this is the proxy we use for demand. You can see that we ended up the year, again, the lower right-hand corner, a little over 200 acre-feet below last year. So what that means on a graphical basis is the last 20 years of consumer demand for water, as identified in the production numbers. The last 3-year average is now 9,817, the 5-year average 9,825, and the 10-year average 10,863. So we seem to have hit kind of a 5-year flat line right around that 10,000 figure. Going to weather, you can't see anything of actual because there was none recorded as actual, really, in September. But the unimpaired stream flow continued, and again, it's almost imperceptible here, but July, August, and September summer months still exceeded long-term averages, which means the kind of the slow rolling effect of the winter kind of made it through a lot longer than we expected. That concludes my report.
Any directors have any questions? Okay, great. We'll move on to item 10, our attorney's report.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, members of the public. Reporting on 2 closed sessions, one on October 3rd and the other earlier this evening at 5 p.m. The closed session on October 3rd focused on a single item, and that is discussions related to real property acquisition. The board did meet with counsel and special counsel, but no reportable action was taken. It is on. Earlier this evening, the board had 2 agenda items. One was the continued review of the performance evaluation for your general manager, and also a closed session concerning real property acquisition and related potential litigation. As to both matters, general direction was provided to your staff and council, but no specific reportable action was taken, other than to continue item number 13 on your agenda.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 11, oral reports on activities of county, city, other agency, committee, associations. Any directors go to any meetings they want to report on? Director Riley?
I did. The Water Master had a meeting on October the 2nd. There was not a full house, but still there was enough people there to conduct business. The city of Seaside is still pursuing an attempt to do an in lieu trade with the groundwater basin, Seaside Groundwater Basin. I got some discussion. I don't want to discuss it. I just want to say that was a subject that was discussed. The second subject that was discussed was whether Water Master should adopt a resolution in support of desal as opposed to pure water expansion. So it was a between the two, and that resolution passed the Water Master Board.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I attended the Special District Association meeting. The speaker was somebody from Monterey One, Lawrence, you can say his last name.
Can't remember his last name, but it was the IT guy.
Yeah, the IT guy. And if we want to do audit by the Homeland Security Department, a free cyber audit and security study, we need to get on the list because it's about 2 years to get it done, to get it done. But they talked about that also at the special district. They're going to raise the price of dinner to $40. Just letting you know up front. And I attended that with Director Riley and the General Manager. I also like to thank Pure Water Monterey for the ribbon cutting. That was an excellent ceremony there. And I want to thank a couple of members that are not on this board right now, but former Mayor Rubio was the mayor's rep. Former Director Brenda Lewis was Division 1 Director. Bob Brower was there. I think he's Division 5. And I want to thank Andy Clark for all the work they done to get that project done. Even though they wasn't there, I think Bob Brower looked great after he got off the board. He's looking good. So Brenda Lewis is looking good after they got off this board. So I think it was the board that was doing it too. But I want to thank you all. And thank the Monterey One and General Manager. And I hope that EIR out is on November the 4th. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Any other meeting attendees? All right, and we'll go to item 12, first action item. Consider expenditure for the Santa Margarita Water Treatment Facility Project, construction and support services. Ms. Hamilton?
Do I get a time limit?
You wish. Yes, if you want.
Yes.
I do. Can we fire on the screen?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, let's fire that up.
I'm going to jump into this pretty quickly and try to move through it to get to your questions. The first step is a brief history on how we got to the bid results that we did. We had a basis of design meeting with the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District operations, engineering, and designer, meeting with CalAM's operation, maintenance, engineering, and their design team. We reached agreement on December 21st, 2018. At that time, we had what's called a planning estimate. Basically, that means the estimate could be an error it could be 50% under estimate, or the bid result could be 100% over estimate. We moved into the budgeting cycle, gathering budget information in April of 2019. At that point, the project was on a fast track, and I didn't really have the time in the design schedule to divert resources for an estimate update. In addition, I didn't have project budget on the design contract to include that, given the fact that we were looking at potential for some substantial scope changes. So staff increased the planning estimate to $2 million, and that would be just for the construction contract. We held a 60% design review meeting on May 30th. We had the same team that agreed upon the basis of design. In addition, we had CalAM's corrosion inhibitor consultant. 95% design review was less than 2 months later. It was the same 60% design review team, in addition to a district constructability review consultant for both civil and electrical. The bid design was released about 2 weeks later. The engineer's estimate was 3.64 million. That was what's called a Class 3 estimate. It can be 20% under. The bid results could be 20% under to 30% higher than the engineer's estimate. That's consistent with standard district practices or historical district practices, and also with the bidding climate at the time. Bids were opened on September 24th. Specialty Construction was the responsible bidder with the lowest responsive bid. The three lowest bids were all within 1% of their average, so we know we have the cost of the work. The Fitch Park is building 2 ASR wells and above ground facilities a little bit down the road. Their design bid proposal for their above ground facilities were $6 million and $6.6 million. Now theirs included their design fees in addition to pump controls for the ASR wells. So our bid results are in line with what they're receiving. What does this mean for the budget? The amount we budgeted for this fiscal year was $2.45 million. That includes some engineering support services and construction management services while the construction contract's being executed. The total project cost, including an award in August and contingencies for both, is about $5.6 million, leaving an unbudgeted portion of approximately $3.1 million. The district's reserve fund balance estimate is approximately $12.3 million, leaving a reserve balance should this project be awarded of $9.18 million. So I sat down to do an analysis of how the estimate went so off the rails. And on the chart you see in front of you, we have a teal line, which is the Class 5 or the planning estimate. The breakdown between categories on the horizontal axis is my opinion of where the engineer's planning estimate would fall. The teal line is what's called a Class 3 estimate. That was that minus 20 to plus 30. It was the estimate, the engineer's estimate we received with the design plans. And in the blue line, I show the average of the three lowest bids. So we can compare the early estimate to the engineer's estimate at bid time to what actually came in with the bid. The building and HVAC were clearly underestimated. The piping and appurtenances, once we had more specification on them, were also underplanned. Instrumentation and electrical was the same situation. All other work is some earthworks that need to be conducted on site for permit requirements and maintainability, and there are several other more minor categories. So in looking at the major costs behind those bid results, what caused the planning estimate to be so far under the bid results? Well, construction costs have increased since the recession. I think some of the numbers that were being used in the planning estimate were numbers from 2011 when we were certainly in a very different bidding climate. The other factor that we have on our site is we're constructing on an existing facility, which isn't completely abnormal, but we're very land constrained. We went from 0.23 acres to 0.9 acres to 1 acre to 1.9 acres. And because we are constructing on a former munitions range, all soil has to stay on site. It's complicated. It's not very easy to do earthworks and do construction on a constrained site. The facility is also operating. They don't have free access to shut down water in order to make tie-ins or stay in the basin for a long period of time, although that shouldn't be a huge factor on this one. Part of being on a former munitions range is some added training time, a little more caution when they're excavating, and I've already talked about the soil management. So the useful life for this project, the Santa Margarita site is located right on top of the Seaside Groundwater Basin. The Seaside Groundwater Basin supplies the storage component for every replacement water supply project of substantial volume on the peninsula. It's for the foreseeable future, we don't foresee a change in a storage location. So this Santa Margarita facility is kind of in a prime location to treat the majority of our replacement water supply. Ductile iron, which has been the material that's been used for our distribution and transmission piping, has an expected lifetime of about 100 years. Concrete masonry buildings, from a real estate perspective, are supposed to last about 40 years prior to needing to regrout. And treatment plants, I looked up on the civil engineering documents, treatment plants with concrete structures are expected to have a lifetime of about 60 to 70 years. That's not necessarily a fair comparison. We're not a traditional water treatment plant. It's a chemical facility with a well site. So take the last bullet with a grain of salt. The capacity, we know we need this, we know we need ASR production capacity to recover pure water Monterey water. In designing capacity for the chemical facility, we wanted to make it consistent with the transition capacity, in large part because future production wells will likely be installed along General Jim Moore Boulevard. And oddly, last week, Cal-Am engineering manager called to discuss the possibility of treating Fitch Park. They're building 2 ASR wells up there, of treating their produced water at the Santa Margarita facility. So the capacity commensurate with the transmission capacity is justified in staff's opinion. We have some pretty high-end building materials. The building materials are a design standard that is in place with our 2 existing buildings. We pledged to those, to adhere to those requirements, standards to the local jurisdiction in 2011, and have continued to commit to following those design standards since 2011. The standard was followed for Pure Water Monterey, and it's my understanding that DeSal will also be following those design standards for their facility in Seaside. The Fire Authority has approved the design standard for the chemical treatment building. We were the first development on land slated for residential development. We have a really great piece of land along General Jim Moore Boulevard. Part of the reason of the aesthetics behind the building materials is the city of Seaside wants to develop that land. And they set some high bars and expect them to be followed. We talked at prior to committees about the well, it's not a requirement, but about the design of a cellar in the building. We have large tanks that are going to contain in up to 3 different chemicals in our situation. If one of those tanks breaks, or leaks, or there's an earthquake, you have to have double containment for chemicals. In this case, the cellar was chosen, which is consistent with the Ord Grove treatment facility in the city of Seaside. Part of the logic behind a cellar is the building height is reduced. There's an aesthetic component to that. Again, our building is at the front of the property, right on General Jim Moore Boulevard. City planning has repeatedly asked us to keep the profile as low as possible. There's additional seismic requirements that would likely be required should we raise the building any taller than we already are. In speaking with operations and maintenance, there's a maintainability component to having a cellar. Along with that big bulk tank that's in the cellar, there's a day tank, and that's the tank that's used to get the chemicals into the water. If there's a spill with the day tank, it drains to the lower cellar portion so that the operators can get in there more safely to neutralize the spill and get the system back online, which is going to increase reliability. For those same reasons, operations feels that it also increases safety because you have ability to access the room without having to build very high containment walls. In particular for disinfection, it's a 6,000-gallon tank. Dechlorination. We have included building space for what's called dechlorination. When chlorine reacts with organics, disinfection byproducts are formed. And you'll see, you know, if you're following the EPA website, there's a lot of discourse about limits for disinfection byproducts. We found with the ASR wells, if after injection of the Carmel River water or any chlorinated water one could extend to, if we wait for 2 months, those disinfection byproducts decay. So there's a 2-month period when we could be producing water that instead we're waiting for the disinfection byproducts to decay so that we can safely serve the water, well, so that CalAm can safely serve the water to the public. Recovering those additional 2 months of production capacity is the least would gain us 2 months. You kind of have a situation where if you get disinfection byproducts out of the equation, you gain production of the least expensive replacement water. The other way to do that is to stop ASR injection early, in which case we would lose 2 months of inject date on a wet or a year when a year when the rain is late. So dechlorination reduces our waiting period. It increases the production capacity up to 900 acre-feet a year just by having those 2 months of additional production. And this option was found to be the cheapest additional production capacity from the Seaside well field. We've also included a room and space and works for a corrosion inhibitor. Corrosion inhibitors required in advance of new water introduction. If you recall from the Flint, Michigan water crisis, part of the reason they ran into the problem they ran into is they introduced a new water with no corrosion inhibitor. So what happened is the new water came in, it released lead from existing old pipes into homes. CalAm, through numerous communication, has said that corrosion inhibitor is going to be a Department of Drinking Water permit condition for production from the ASR wells. So it was clear that we were adding scope, and at the same time we were removing scope. I can go over some of the deletions and some of the revisions. The main point in this, and these numbers that you see are my estimates of the value of work that was deleted or revised, is there weren't any, there was no $1 million item that we could remove without removing or without affecting the capability of the facility. Additionally, we've delayed some work. Landscaping has been moved to the 2021 contract. The dechlorination works, not the room, because we're building space for it right now while we're building the building on new land. But the works for dechlorination I've delayed for a future project. Additionally, we have administrative approval from the city for more cost-effective gates and doors and less expensive what's called low-impact design. When you harden off a certain amount of natural land, you have to install certain works to contain stormwater on site. So we have some less expensive options we're going to look into with our contractor. And again, looking at what's been deleted and what we might be able to adjust, there's no magic bullet to recover in the $1 million range without deleting some functionality, whether that's capacity or treatment capability. Additionally, delaying things like delaying some works, cost to retrofit can be substantially higher than building it the first time. So I struggled, given the bid results. And my rationale behind my request is that we require works for new water supply now. Pure Water Monterey is coming. We need production capacity to recover that water. We're going to need production capacity to recover water from the region's main storage. Again, this facility's vital as we move off of the Carmel River and onto produced waters. The corrosion inhibitor is going to be a permit condition for ASR wells production after numerous conversations with CalAm. Experience in other locations, independent of the permit condition, is when we introduce and mix in new waters to old pipes, you can have some problems affecting public health. We've included dechlorination space to ensure maximum production capacity of the least expensive replacement water supplies. Lastly, the lowest bidder, we've had a positive experience with that contractor at Pure Water Monterey, and the subcontractor that they're using to construct the building is the same contractor who built our other two buildings. So again, the budget information is shown in front of you. It would be a request for a budget adjustment of $3.142 million. I'm requesting the board authorize the general manager to enter into a contract agreement with Specialty Construction in the amount of $4,649,400, with authorization for the general manager to enter into a contract with Pueblo Water Resources for engineering services during construction. That's for RFI review, submittal review, in the amount of $148,100. Authorization for the general manager to authorize general contingency for unforeseeable circumstances in the amount of $479,750, and a budget adjustment of $3,142,635. And a schedule was requested, which I apologize, I tried about 15 different ways to get this to show up bigger in PowerPoint. But this is basically an engineer's rough estimate of some of the tasks and shows a project completion time of effectively June 30th. A huge disclaimer here, it's dependent on weather, it's dependent on unforeseen conditions, and procurement time is always kind of a wild card. That'll depend on construction and how hot certain items are. And now I know that there are questions.
Directors, any questions? Gary.
Hey, Maureen. When you made the presentation to the admin committee, I had mentioned that I had spoke with Division of Drinking Water, and they told me that corrosion control treatment is not a requirement that they have. And so I had indicated at that time that it would be a good idea for you to follow up with Division of Drinking Water to confirm whether or not it is a requirement. Did you happen to do that?
As staff, I felt maybe that I shouldn't be contracting a regulator for somebody else's permit. We asked CalAm to do that again and confirm again. And we have, I believe, a log of the communications over time that we've had with them. And so I can provide the CalAm documentation or a documentation of the communications we've had with CalAm, with them stating it will be a permit requirement.
But so you didn't get, as CalAm I saw,
Yeah,
typically.
Catherine's hanging out back there.
But normally Chris is here because actually I spoke with Chris and he confirmed that it's not a permit requirement. So that's why I'm confused about, on the one hand, you saying CalAm said it's a requirement.
Or will become.
No, it says in the thing, it says is a requirement, will be a requirement of the permit, is what the presentation says.
And it's the only information I have from them. And again, it's on numerous communications beginning in January of this year. There's a communication log were handing. I couldn't call
Yeah,
a
it doesn't help
regulator
me.
on someone else's
Um,
permit.
On the dechlorination, again, it's my understanding that the dechlorination would only be required or necessary for a short period of time, and that still the details between CalAm's engineering and operations and the need for dechlorination has not been fully vetted yet.
I think for an owner of a desal plant, absolutely. They can make up that additional production capacity with their desal plant. The district position has been that we want to ensure maximum injection and recovery of our cheapest replacement water supplies. So that dechlor buys us either an additional 2 months of production of the cheapest water should we need that, or if the production is prioritized over injection, it can extend the injection season up to 2 months.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and Director Byrne, who's not here during the Water Supply Planning Committee meeting, said that you're still going to have temporary structures for dechlor with higher berm requirements and a rooftop requirement, and by the time you take it out of the permanent facility and build the temporary facilities, you've kind of used up half the budget on that anyway, and then it makes it much more difficult to come back in. So her recommendation as the architect at that meeting was mobilize once, do it once, don't try to retrofit later if you decide you want to go get those 2 months a year of recovery.
So in looking at the, I think it's on page 121 actually, it says that the bid set and engineer's estimate were issued on August 6th, and that the engineer's estimate at that time was 3.6 million. So my question that rises in my mind is, that was 2.5 months ago. Why wasn't the board, and this probably is a question for
Yeah,
Dave,
I'll take that one.
why the board wasn't informed of the tripling of the cost or doubling of the cost at that time?
Yeah, so I heard about it probably a week after it came out, maybe 10 days. But at our September 9th administrative committee meeting, followed the next morning at the September 10th water supply planning meeting, I did say to all of the assembled directors in both committees, we're about to open bids in 2 weeks, and they're going to be way more than budget. But we might as well wait and see what the bids come in at. So yeah, there's a time lag. Rather than inform the board that the engineer's estimate was over, we were 2 weeks away from the actual. And obviously, with 3 of them coming within 1% of each other, the price is the price. So that was probably an impending indication of what the price was going to be was right around the corner. But I did tell both, kind of maybe in an offhand way, but get ready for it. We're about to bust through the budget.
Maureen, on one of the slides, it was shown on there, but then there wasn't any discussion of it. There was the reference to value engineering.
Yes, I apologize.
No, that's okay. And so, yeah, that slide there. Who was this? Was there a certified value engineering specialist brought in on this project to take a look at the design?
There was not. If I may, can I
Oh, yeah,
include a bit
please.
of my presentation? I forgot. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
So I did. I heard what you said about certified value engineers, and I reached out to engineering consultants that I work with on Pure Water Monterey, both of whom's firms offer value engineering services, and they outsource, which to a third-party company, and put me in contact with Renee Hoekstra, who's the president of SAVE International. It's value-eng.org. And I guess they do the licensing for value engineering. And I talked with her a little bit about our situation, and I'd also talked with the 2 consultants. And so I asked for a rule of thumb on, how much do you think on this size project you can save? And when she found out the size of our project, she said, oh, no, it's just too small. So my plan is, she said you can get value if you do it more at the 30% design level. So my plan is with management approval to kind of include this as a standard design practice. Much like we did the constructability review with the civil and electrical engineers on this project, I want to do the same thing with value engineering as a part of the design process. And because our projects are small, just get it in at the 30% design, which is what Renee recommended.
Yeah, no, I would agree with her recommendation. In my past life, I was certified as a value engineering specialist in my previous life.
Well, you could have done it for us.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm done working. So you also provided in the package excerpts from cost estimating. And in your chart, you did a comparison of Class 5 and Class 3. Now, an engineer's estimate is actually a Class 1 estimate. And so why didn't you compare the actual engineer's estimate in this analysis as opposed to a Class 5 or Class 3?
The historical practice at the district is to require a plus 25% estimate, which is falls into the Class 3 category. In talking again with a number of design professional contacts, I like to reach out and get multiple opinions. That on this size project with a grossly underestimated planning estimate, but on this size project that a Class 5, I think that's -5 to plus 10%, given the bidding climate, would be throwing money down the drain, and that a Class 3 would be more appropriate, again, with the current bidding climate.
But we had a Class 1, and so that's what I'm getting at.
We don't have a Class 1.
Sure, that's the engineer's estimate.
And I apologize, I've been using our engineer's estimate issued at the time of bid document release as the Class 3 estimate. I apologize. That's the Class 3, the 3.64 million is the Class 3 indicated here. I should have made that clearer.
Okay, because it's actually a Class 1, but, okay.
The point of time, given the chart, you would think it would be a Class 1, but the standard they went to was Class 3 standard.
Well, actually, even by this guidance, it says that it's done at the time
The bids.
design is complete,
Yeah.
even before bidding. So, and that's what the engineer's estimate came out at that time.
And that was one of the cuts I made in the design contract, and I will not do that again. We are going to make sure that we follow my design practices, if it's acceptable to my boss.
That's the only questions I had. Thanks.
And the publication that I gave to you that has the yellow highlights speaks a little bit to some of the confusion as to, was it required for the permit? Was Cal-Am saying it was required? And unfortunately, neither John nor Maureen had a copy of this report. So when they came to me last week, I said, well, didn't you see what the recommendations in the report were? And it was new to them. And as you can see in the highlights, it's kind of echoed throughout that it's the recommendation of Trussell Technologies to do this zinc orthophosphate inhibitor installation, balance the system with the Carmel River, which is already hit with it at the Begonia Iron Removal Plant, and so forth. And just, there's strong recommendations for any water system with multiple sources of new waters was to get with the program and do inhibitors.
Do any other directors have questions?
I have one comment. Go ahead.
We'll save your comment. We'll take questions.
Okay.
This, what the general manager was talking about, can we require it? Cal-Am saying, some in Cal-Am saying yes, some saying no. What is best for the public?
I am a ratepayer and taxpayer on the peninsula. I want it in my water.
Yes.
So,
yes.
yeah, I want it.
How much estimated it's gonna cost us to put that in this building?
Well, and the way I divided that, I included the building cost is lumped together because it's hard to price a building with, here's 3/4 of the building and here's the price for 1/4 of the building because material and economies for delivering everything at the same time. So a part of the building and HVAC, a part of the instrumentation and electrical goes into that. The works that we could delay or cancel is what you see on the CORR interior. And we had different estimates. I imagine that's going to be about $200,000 on the interior. The way it was bid had a range of 1.2 million to 100,000. So they had reversed some of the piping and appurtenances. Bottom line is, I think it's going to cost us about another 100 to 200,000 to finish off the corrosion inhibitor works, and that's included in this bid price.
Okay, so it's best to have it. And
I want it.
I believe we should put it in there for the public. I don't want to be in New Jersey and Flint, Michigan, and we know the stuff is coming up and we're doing a lot of mixture. My next question, is the contractor here tonight?
He is.
Okay. I wanted to make sure that when you hear this, you don't get mad, but I want you on time.
You can blame.
We got a contingency plan, contingency of about $400 and some thousand. I don't want you to use it. So I hope that we check, I hope that you check and recheck this before we start building it, so it will be on time, and you're not coming, my general manager, our general manager is not coming back to us and saying, we need another 100,000. No, it's gonna be hard. But we know we need this building, but don't mess us around, please. I appreciate that. I looked at Monterey 1 water, there's a lot of mess over there. Shouldn't be.
Not on our component.
Not on ours, I hope. But on this one, I want it done, so thank you. Thank you, good job.
Any other questions, directors? I do have one for you, Maureen. On your slide on the schedule, you stated
Yes.
that that was an engineer schedule.
Yeah. it was on the
Um,
schedule. I'm
Did the
sorry.
contractor submit a schedule with his bid?
He did not. The schedule will be submitted after bid award.
Okay. So right now, and I'm looking at you, Mr. Contractor, do we have, as Alvin said, I assume that do you understand the time on this project and that the importance of meeting the deadline, and that you still believe that you're able to make that? Because, I mean, the engineer can say that, but I just want to hear it from you. That's all.
And
Alright.
if I may, procurement, I think is our procurement and weather are our wild card.
Right, of course. Can't control the weather. All right, so I'd like to open this up for public comment. Anyone wishing to speak on this item?
If I may.
Please.
My name is Tom Seidel. I'm with Specialty Construction, and we are the apparent low bidder on the project. And you saw how tight the numbers were. I'd love to look you all in the eye and tell you that was because of my wonderful estimating, but I think I just got lucky on that one, and everybody needs to be lucky now and again. Specialty Construction is very excited just for this opportunity for me to be able to stand here and be considered for the project. So as I mentioned, we are, or as was mentioned, we're the contractor for the pure water injection facilities. We've established a very strong working relationship with the district and their construction management, their engineers, and their consultants. Fortunately for us, we're in a position that we do have a local team that's working on that Pure Water Monterey project, and given the opportunity to move that team down to this project, which is, you could almost hit a golf ball between the two projects. That's what we plan to do. We plan to, we've committed those personnel, myself being one of them, and our superintendent who's local to the area. He's very excited to continue to work with the Somas Cavello team, as well as the Pure Monterey, not Pure Water, sorry, the district team. I just want everybody to understand, we bid hundreds of jobs every year. And this is not your standard project. I mean, these are not just a standard row house that's going up or a commercial building. These are unique projects. We see engineers' estimates, and very rarely are they within 20%. So this is not a unique situation where an engineer wasn't able to accurately estimate construction costs on the Monterey Peninsula, which is one of the most difficult work environments there are for construction. So I just wanted to kind of make that quick statement that it's not rare for these water type projects to the engineer's estimate to be off. So we're committed to successful completion of this project on time. I can look you all in the eyes and tell you it's not just hollow words. If you want to know how we do business, just ask your staff, and I think they'd be able to tell you. So I'll leave you with that. I hope to be working with your team on this project.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak? Okay, then I will close public comment and bring it back to the board for discussion.
Move approval.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. On
Okay.
on the motion.
Well, he has a second, so.
Right. So we have a motion to approve from Director Edwards, it was, and a second from Director Potter, I believe it was. Okay, so further discussion, Director Riley.
I just have one comment. It's still surprising to me that the building and HVAC piece of this project seems to me is such a traditionally well-known bit of data that's out in the community for any contractor to deal with. And it's still surprising to me that this was where the major discrepancy was between the professional estimate of what the Class 5 and the Class 3 estimates were compared to the bids. And it's not a question, I don't need an answer, but I hope you're careful about who that consultant might be on the next project. That's all I ask.
Very well. Any further discussion?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Director Hoffman.
I'm deeply concerned. A couple of things. One is the 2-month delay in the board being told about the engineer's estimate coming in at over $1.5 million higher than what was budgeted. That's very troubling to me. It's also very troubling that an appropriate value engineering analysis wasn't done on this project, and particularly when the engineer's estimate came in following design, showing that the huge bust, and that was another opportunity to then have the design looked at that time. Without having a value engineering analysis done on this project, I can't support awarding a contract when there's a real potential that a lot of money, a lot of taxpayer money could be saved if simply a value engineering analysis was done. Secondly, number 3 of the item, which talks about authorizing the general manager to spend upwards of almost $500,000 without any oversight from the board on this project. And again, I do not agree with the concept of letting anybody spend $500,000 without the board having and implementing their responsibility of fiscal oversight. Thank you.
Director Edwards.
To the general manager, if you start spending that contingency money, do you have to come back to the board and talk to us?
Thank you. That's where I was headed. It's authorization of the 10% contingency, but any of the change orders of size will have to come back to the board for authorization.
Okay, and as a ratepayer, I think, are we getting any money from CalAm or anything for this building?
There will be reimbursement on the maintenance expenses,
Okay.
not for construction.
Okay, so just my comments, I'm going to support it. And well, one more question for you. How long do it takes to do what Director Hoffman would like us to do, to go back and see these values and
Yeah, we've done value engineering on projects before.
how much time would it take?
Well, you'd have to cancel all the bids, rebid the project at some point in the future. And that's if this is the project that you want, then the price is right based on the bids that have come in. I think the idea on value engineering, and Maureen spoke to this, on large-scale projects, there's probably room to find that silver bullet. What we found when we value engineered plant, oh gosh, I can't remember, it was $70, $80 million worth of project, and there was $7 million of potential savings. When you get down to a project of this size, chances are you'll see 300, 400, 500, best case, $1,000, which is nothing to scoff at. I mean, that's real money. But it'll take a lot of work to get there, and as I said, you'd rebid the project and time.
And the time that we got, because we're gonna start drawing water out, pure water gonna start putting water in, we're gonna need it. So, I think on the next project, you look at the long route around it.
Yeah,
Like
and,
Director Hoffman.
and they mentioned the constraints. So, you know, we want to have this thing wrapped up before the injection season. And so, you know, right now, even though it's roughly July, end date on a very rough schedule, you know, we need to be ready to go by the end of autumn. So there isn't much wiggle room to undo it, do study, and then rebid it.
Okay, thank you. It has my support.
Chair,
Yes,
I just
Director
wanted to
Adams.
follow up on the comments about the timeline. I know that that's going to be a challenge, but I'm just want to ensure that we're really keeping our eye on it, and if we are going to be getting reports back, and who's actually going to be in charge of ensuring that we are monitoring it just really closely.
So you may recall that a month ago, maybe 2 months ago, we hired Somas. You approved it. They're represented here. They are our construction manager on the project. Everyone's serving in a role that we're comfortable with. Specialty has been contractor on the Pure Water Monterey injection site. Somas is construction manager on that. As you may recall, as we go down the 4 bidders, there was one that we were not too happy with performance, and luckily they were not the lowest qualified bidder. So I think we've got a really good team. Obviously, there are, you know, 2 weather and procurement are the wild cards. But, you know, that being said, this is why it was an identified problem. It wasn't 2 months. Director Hoffman, I did probably the major subset of the board with water supply planning and AdCom say we're 2 weeks away from a surprise of rather large proportion. But, yeah, we did not send the whole engineer's estimate to the board and say we've got a budget problem. Because at that time it would have been about a $1.6 million budget problem, and it turned out to be a $3.2 million budget problem. So I figured we'd just wait for the bids to come in.
So going back to my question then, who's actually, if I understand that
Yeah.
it's the, you know, the project manager.
Yeah, it kind of goes from here to John, to Maureen, to our construction manager.
Thank you.
So I am the construction manager for Somas for the injection well project, and I can speak to the working relationship that we've developed with Maureen and Tom. We did experience many design issues that came up in our current project, and SCI in particular is very proactive, as is Somas, in identifying issues that come up. Procurement in particular for this project, we would absolutely be encouraging either advanced procurement by the owner of the district to get that going even before award in the submittal process. And in addition, we look very closely at the baseline schedule that Tom would, if awarded, produce for the project. And we provide monthly updates as to how we're keeping track on meeting that July 1st deadline.
Okay, and will those monthly updates be brought back to the board?
Yeah, we can do that.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Good.
Absolutely.
Good. Thank you
Yeah,
very
normally,
much.
so like on some of the other projects, Recycled Water Committee on Monterey One Water has been getting the monthly, and then they're just kind of thrown in the packet, but we can just bring it straight to the board.
So I'd accept that as a secondary.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Director Hoffman?
Yeah, just following up, actually, if you read the recommendations, number 3, what it says is authorize the general manager to approve change orders to the construction and service contracts, or enter into new contracts for the project to allow for unforeseen items up to $479,000. So again, the way this is worded is giving the general manager the authority to enter into contracts without board approval. And that's not the case on contracts over $25,000 currently. So I don't know why we are circumventing our normal procedures on contracting and allowing the general manager to spend $500,000 without supervision.
I don't think we are. I think we are coming back, and I asked that question when I start questioning, can the general manager come back to us and tell us about any change item? And if we need to make that in the motion, it's in there. I'm willing to make that in motion, that you come back to us and report any changes and let us squawk at it and vote on it or whatever.
Yeah, I took it to mean that if it exceeded my authorization, that it would come back. I'm being told that that's not really the case, so.
Scheduling wise, it would not be feasible, because once you get the project started, you do need the contingency on a $5 million project, which is 10%, which is not quite high. And if you recall, the Sleepy Hollow $2 million project was about 15 or 18% contingency, so you need the flexibility.
Can I speak to how we've at least handled it for the pure water program? Is that any change orders over a certain amount, whichever your particular agency has, would be brought to the board. Again, that each change order would go through the process here at the project level, and then the reason for the change, if it's over a certain amount, typically would go to the board.
Melanie, that will delay it.
That's for the, excuse me, for the allowance, that's initially.
And that's when we exceed the budget, like we have to
Correct.
find out we have to draw a well.
But exactly, as far as billing against that allowance is what I'm saying, is during construction, you have that allowance, but as changes occur, you will be absolutely brought up to date as to how much of that contingency is being used, if any, and then each change order, you will absolutely have a package saying this is why the change is occurring, this is how much. We've looked at the cost estimate independently that we've arrived at to make sure that his pricing is fair. So that kind of process, again, is a standard practice during construction. So the board should be appraised at any point in time as far as any changes that are exceeding a certain amount. So I just want to.
And again, that's my concern, is that I'm not hearing what that amount is. I'm not hearing from our staff, what the procedures and processes are in dealing with change orders and the amount of change orders. I'm hearing from the consultants on what they normally do, but I'm not getting the warm and fuzzies about how we are going to be doing our fiduciary duty of oversight on spending potentially $500,000 of additional funds on this project.
I feel like we just made the point that this has time relevance. There's a deadline, there's a delivery date, there's water to be put in the ground, and this project needs to be finished on time so that we can meet those deadlines and have that capacity. I would hate for us to point out to the contractor we can't stand any delays, and then we build in an administrative delay that I think that's why we have a general manager, to trust that there's a relationship, that he has certain authorities and he has certain oversight responsibility. I mean, we have the oversight responsibility, and as long as we can check on it and then get checked out on it, I'm in favor of it. And I would hate us to be the one that kind of slows things down.
Director Edwards?
Director Hoffman, if you got ideas, I heard this report twice. The first one, I didn't hear no comments like that. The second one, I don't know what you did at administrative committee, but the third one is tonight, and you are making comments that you should have made in the beginning, so we could have worked on them. I like your comments, but I don't like how the way they move in motion. This plan needs to be done. And if you hear this thing on the first time you heard it, and you start with these considerations, I would appreciate you would have brought them up, so the general, because I came to that meeting, water supply, just to hear what's going on. And I'm an alternate. But I wish you would have just came up with all those ideas that you got tonight on that first or that second meeting with the administrative committee, so that people can understand, or so that staff can start working on something that can help you out.
But to this end, I think we've had a couple sidebar conversations. We will, and now I understand what they're asking for, which is exactly what Director Hoffman's worried about. But we'll come up with some sort of communication regime that at least brings you into the loop on requested change orders and gives you a chance to kind of raise a flag or call a special meeting if need be, but
Thank you, because if it get that bad, call the special meeting.
yeah.
So we can be up to date and we can keep everybody in the family happy.
So with that vague language, I'm supportive also. Yep, let's call a question.
So I believe right now we have a motion to approve that has a second motion from Director Edwards, second from Director Potter, with General Manager stating that the board will receive monthly updates, as well as any will get the early notification if anything seems to be leading towards a change order or an increase in budget. Is that a fair statement?
Fair.
Any further discussion?
Question's been called.
Oh, yes, we called the question. Very well, thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Okay, motion carries 5-1. I believe that is the end of our agenda, but before we adjourn, I would like to remind everyone that we will be meeting November 12th at the Embassy Suites to discuss the feasibility study report. Director Hoffman?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Chair, just on the item 20, it's one of the reports, informational items, staff reports, number 20, which is on page 183. There's a statement made on page 184, which says that staff plans to begin gravel placement in mid-September. Well, we're in October.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering, was this report actually updated for this meeting, or so what is the status of the gravel placement, I guess?
So it was, delivered, as you can see from the photograph, and then getting it placed is still ongoing, I think. John, do you? It's all been placed at this point, yeah. Thanks, Thomas.
Okay, and on that note, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Very good.